All right, what's up, everybody? Welcome back here to Kickin It With Knuble, episode number 13. Mike, we are back. This is like the fifth time we've tried to record this. So we're finally getting back into it. But it's been a bit, Mike. Lots to talk about. How's life treating you?
It's good. It's a good time of year. Lots of fun this time of year, and kids home and in and out after exams, and home for a couple of days before they go back. And so, lots of good sports to watch. Got the football championship series starting Friday,
Hmm.
and so it's a really unique time in sports, and in the NCAA level for sure. It's kind of this big transition going, and it's interesting to see. And we've had big changes in junior hockey being announced recently. You can have the CHL players go the NCAA route. So, which is very interesting because it's always your nemesis a little bit. They recruit against each other. Now they can work together. So it's
Right.
certainly, you know, I got to, it's almost like back in the day when the Cold War, like when they knocked the wall down there in Germany and then everybody's on the same team again, kind of strange, same type of feeling, but in sports. So
Right.
it's interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, it definitely is interesting. I think for me, like I think when I look at that stuff and I kind of look at like the junior levels and things like that, obviously I think most people have like different opinions and ideas of like which one's better and whatnot. But I feel like when you look overall at just like the teams, the players, and things like that, it feels. I mean, obviously, good players come out of every league, and it goes, both ways. Like good players and bad players come out of every league. For you as a college guy, is
Yeah.
that something you probably would have wanted maybe back then, like when you were playing in Michigan at all, or no?
So backing up further, I think I knew I was going to go the college route. I think some of the kids in Ontario, and for better or worse, I mean it is what it is. Like their grandpa played in the OHL, their uncle played in the OHL, their dad played in the OHL, they're playing in the OHL. It's kind of all they know. I think the onus is going to be on the NCAA to get up into these towns in Western Canada, Ontario, and Quebec, and really educate people on their options. And before it wasn't really an option, and now it could be to come down to the states and go to school. So I mean, it's nice you can still play in that league. I think, if I was a Michigan, I grew up in Michigan, even my two sons who went off to play in the USHL, why couldn't they have played in Flint or Sarnia or Windsor or Sault Ste. Marie, or somewhere in the OHL? It's going to be interesting to see how this plays out over a couple of years. Um, to see if the top U.S. players go to Canada because the top Canadian kids are there. You drew some top Canadian kids down to the USHL, the Macklin Celebrinis, he was first, James Hagens, who's going to be first overall. He played, with the U.S. program. And so, Connor Bedard played in the WHL. But, it's the college route's grabbing a lot of real high end Canadian kids. Adam Fantilli, went to
Hmm.
Michigan. He was a top couple pick. So it's going to be very interesting. I think there's going to be a lot of education, and then kids have to keep their grades up. I play with a lot of guys who played in the OHL and junior that once they hit 10th grade, that high school was over. They were done. They knew that was just hockey or bust, right? So some of those kids will have to follow through a little bit, but
Yeah.
it's certainly going to be very interesting and change the landscape a bit. And I guess time will tell. Maybe in 2 or 3 years, you have a better example of what percentage are able to pull this off and what percentage really care to. So I don't know. It's certainly interesting. Now it doesn't affect a guy like Jet Lachenko, who's under Philly contract. So those kids in the OHL who sign their NHL contracts and the team keeps them comfortable, then they're ineligible for that. They can't do that. They're still technically pros. They can't do it. But for the kids who are draft picks, etc., who've not signed contracts, they can come down and play. And even kids, in Sweden and Europe, as long as they're not being paid to play, they could play on a men's team and really just accept their expenses, and they'll have a chance to play in the NCAA too. So it's certainly, there's got to be a lot of talk and education about that and trying to get people to at least understand their options better when it was really kept from them, and probably try and keep them in the dark, quite frankly,
Right.
and there wasn't a need to know your options, and now there's a need to know your options.
Yeah. No, for sure. I think it's a really good answer too, because I think when you look at it, um, there's definitely a lot of buzz around it, first of all, and two, like it's It's definitely going to change things. I think, for me, like I've always kind of looked at it like it was either guys played, OHL, all that stuff, and then they ended up just or college. It was like basically one or the other. So it's interesting. Like there's always been a feud there where like what league kind of produces better players and all that stuff too. And like now that seems like it's kind of gone at this point. And at least and it, or at least could be is kind of what you're saying too. So we'll see kind of how that plays out. Um,
Yeah, yeah. I mean, still the OHL and CHL. Yeah, still the OHL and the CHL still going to be like 16 to 20. So if you get like
mhm.
19, 20 years old, you're not sure you need a little longer runway, then you go to college. So now, or if you're a good 18-year-old, you can be playing against 21 and 22-year-olds. So um, I don't know. It's going to be very interesting to see how that shakes out. So,
Yeah.
like I said, there's going to be a build up to it. There's a ramp up to it. Unfortunately, it probably means a little bit less college spots for American kids because there'll be some more Canadian kids taking spots, but at the college level. But it's kind of the way it goes, and the law of the jungle a little bit.
Right. Yeah, no, for sure. Um, okay, so in terms of the Flyers a little bit, Mike, we last talked November 20th. Um, they're 6-5-2 since. Some pretty good wins. I think the record probably could be a little better than what it is. Um, and well, I guess like overall in the season, and also since we last talked, there's been some games that are like definitely ones that you probably could have won in there. Um, one of the big topics, and I know this is kind of old news at this point, but one of the last topics that we talked about um, was the Fort Nations face-off. Konecny, Sanheim, they both make Team Canada. Ristolainen makes Finland. I think it's pretty self-explanatory about Konecny. He's had a really solid season. I mean, he's been the Flyers MVP. Him and Michkov really have been like kind of the two-headed monster there for the Flyers in their offense. Um, you have Sanheim, who he's played like he could win the Norris. I don't think he's going to, but he's certainly played like it. And then you have Ristolainen, who's just been solid, kind of shut down defenseman. He's going to play top four for Finland. Um, I don't think the Finns have a ton of uh, like high end defensemen either. It kind of drops off after Heiskanen a lot, I think. But still, I mean, Ristolainen himself has had a really solid year and he had a pretty good career in Philly. Just any thoughts on like that? Well, obviously, those three guys making the team, and then also that tournament, itself. Is that something that you would have wanted to play in if you were in the NHL, or when you were in the NHL? I mean.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, it's a great filler for like a non-Olympic year.
Hmm.
Obviously, there was some of this like they had the World Cup, I think, in the late '90s. It was kind of like the Kachuk, the Doug Wade era, the Jeremy Roenick, kind of that group. Um, that was kind of the late '90s, and that was against Canada, and those were pretty knocked down. That was held in September before training camp, and the guys really played each other pretty hard. That was they left no mercy on each other. That was not like a shinny showcase or anything like that. They played really really hard against each other, and then
Hmm.
we're very happy when they won. I think the US won in '98 or whatever, but they won. But I don't know if you'll have that kind of knockdown drag out type thing anymore. Maybe the game's changed a little bit more. Um, Certainly the players will try and play and get through it and not necessarily get injured, and that's where the ownership and GMs are kind of crossing their fingers, and they're like, oh man, I don't want my guy getting injured can really mess up your playoff plans and your playoff future. um, but the guys are like they're gonna play pretty hard. They're not gonna waltz their way through this. They're when something's on the table, they're gonna want to win it. There's probably some monetary gain in it. I think we saw with the NBA Cup this week. For a couple of guys on the bottom of those NBA rosters who are basically doubling their salaries. The guys in Milwaukee who won. I think some of the in-tournament stuff, even the Milwaukee Bucks weren't quite sure how to frame it. Do you celebrate? You saw the NBA put out beer and champagne and the glasses and figured they're going to celebrate it and pop up bottles, and it actually was pretty quiet. So I think they're ready to get out of there and get on with the season. So it's kind of a weird, strange effect like that. Positive is the other 600 players. If you have 110 players involved in this, the other 600 get some time off and can get away a little bit and rest and recover. And and have some time away, which is great. So it's more of a grind for the guys. I think the big risk is injury. For the
Yeah.
guys who are playing, and said GMs are definitely sitting there with their fingers crossed and hoping that one of their key guys is not injured in the event.
Right. Yeah, no, for sure. I feel like, I think when you look at the rosters, they're pretty self-explanatory. There's a couple guys that kind of got left off that I was like, it just didn't make any sense to me. Example, like Cole Caulfield, for the start he's having and the scoring and all that. And I'm like, I get it. The US kind of went with like the veteran kind of leadership and all that. But I feel like you have enough of that. And when you look at some of the high end guys that they have, I think taking Caulfield over Brock Nelson is and that's obviously no uh obviously
Slight.
nothing negative towards Nelson, but I mean come on, I mean Caulfield he's one of the best shooters in the game. I don't know, that was just crazy to hear. Um, Mike,
Yeah,
I feel
there
like
it gets hard, right?
yeah,
It's a tough call those last ones,
right,
and if you win, then you pick the right ones. If you lose, then you didn't. Somebody's got something to say about who you picked. But um,
exactly,
again, yeah, it's hard on the those last guys. Very very tough decisions.
right,
To leave like a
yeah.
Patrick Kane out, I mean, generation kind of
Hmm.
happened when they're coming in the Olympics in 2006. That was the end of that group, and then it was the Canes and the Ryan Millers and that group. That was the core group. So these turnovers happen every 10, 15 years where the real core group starts to switch again.
Yeah. No, it's definitely a good point. Okay, so as for the Flyers, Mike, the last time they played Detroit, we'll start with the Wings, because there were two games against them. Obviously, the last couple games have been pretty good but rough at the same time. December's been a little weird. They've had some games that they just couldn't close out. They had, obviously, these two games here against the Wings. They got Columbus twice this month, and then they go out to California. So a little weird. They do have the Kings tonight as we're recording this. Um, but last night was fun. It was, obviously one of the more entertaining games. We were talking about that a little bit before we started. Just how, I feel like it's one of them things on the schedule where they always try to like pump up like former like cup rematches. Where it's like Flyers Wings and then like I think like the past couple years when they were doing like the Wednesday night rivalries and they had like a bunch of different like random games and things like that. And it was just like, how do you even kind of consider this a rivalry? And Flyers Wings was always one of those ones where it was like, why? Like just because they played in the '97 final kind of thing. Um, but regardless, it was 4-1 Flyers back in Philly. Scott Lawton with 4 goals. That's the first
Mhm.
time since '02, and that was before I was born, before you even played there. So that was it played in Philly. That was crazy. Um,
Yeah.
Honestly, before I get into that, did you have any thoughts on Lawton getting four?
Well, it's certainly like, yeah, and two in the last like empty netters, right? Yeah. So
Right.
what a thrill. Obviously a super memorable game. I love the slapper coming down the center of the ice, and
Yeah.
going bar down in the shorthanded one. I thought that was fantastic.
Right.
What a veteran shot that was. That was great to
Hmm.
see. And I don't
Right.
remember the second goal. I don't
It
remember the
was
second
the
goal,
the
but then he had
shorthanded
two empty
goal.
netters.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Yep. It was the
Okay. So
shorthanded.
then it was,
Yeah, 2-on-1.
they had two empty netters. What a big thrill. My only hat trick, I had all three. I think we beat Anaheim 3-1 or 3-0. But
Three
then,
nothing.
when he got all
Yep.
four, he got 4-1. What a
Hmm.
big thrill.
Yeah.
And that just can, really make or break your season, really can give you a shot in the arm and just, do wonders for your confidence and make
Right.
it enjoyable going to the rink every day. A little happier coming to the rink after something like that and unique, and those 4 goal games, I mean, are three are rare. 3 goal games are super rare. And then a 4 goal game is you're
That's
in
even
small
rarer.
company there.
Right.
There aren't many guys that have 4 goal games, so
Mm-mm.
um, who cares how you get them? Doesn't matter. You got 4 of them. So
Yeah.
um, big thrill, I'm sure, for him and his family. That's pretty awesome.
Yeah.
And then the game last night, I think I give the Flyers a lot of credit. Kept fighting back. Certainly, the goals that they gave up are a little bit preventable. I think
Yeah.
some were some bad breaks, tough changes. Um, 2-on-0,
Face
where
off
you ever see
play.
that happen, a bad exchange, a
Yeah.
face-off play. I always call those like unearned goals. where you're
Yeah,
not hemmed in, where it's imminent goal, like it's gonna come, it's coming, it's coming. You're getting gonna get scored on. These were just like strikes down the ice, and whether they were self-inflicted a little bit. Cam York ended up paying the price on one. You had a bad exchange up by high in the blue line where you've got to be as a younger players and as forwards, you've got to be on point there and be like, I cannot like make a mistake this high in the blue line when I know I've
yeah,
got Jamie Drysdale down the sideboards and I'm the last guy here. I can't be making a mistake here. I really got to make sure I take care of the puck. And then quick up on a change where one of the D went for a tough change, put Drysdale in a bad spot again, and so it was kind of a combination of errors. But you have to admire the fight, right? And
yeah.
coming back, and that game was 4-4 with 10 minutes left in the third, so
Right.
ends up 6-4 with an empty netter. What do it's
Exactly.
kind of sign of some stuff that's clean upable, which is good.
Right. Honestly, Mike, that's been the story of the month, really. Like they've had a lot of games where it's just like blown leads here and there, a couple changes, like some bad penalties at times. It's been like that all month, and I think they're still trying to figure out not what they are as a team, but I guess just like what their identity is, I think, for this year. You know what I mean? Because I think they understand what their identity is as like culture and all that, but like as a team, and I think on ice play has been a little tough with that because I think it's hard to look at the Flyers roster, I think, in some ways, because you look at it and you see a lot of guys that are just high end guys like Konechny, Michkov. Sanheim's had a really solid year. Urson, he's proven that he can, still at least be a starter, and he came back in the lineup too. Sean Couturier is still proven that he can still play center at a pretty high level. But the biggest thing that they don't have is, they don't have a number one center. They don't have that. They don't have a great power play. It's been a little bit better this season, but it's had its moments where it's looked good. It's had some moments where it's looked very similar to the past couple of years. And they're still waiting on some guys to really, keep kind of flourishing. And really, outside of those, what, four guys I mentioned, Urson, Couturier, Konechny, and Michkov, the rest of the roster is essentially a question mark. Like Tippett, he struggled a little bit this year to get going. Forrester struggled to obviously put up points and things like that. I think they've had some good games from guys like Lawton, like we talked about. Uh, but I just think it's just so hard to judge them because I think one part of the roster wants to just keep soaring and keep kind of going towards the playoffs and things like that, but the rest of the roster can't kind of hold up with that. And that's kind of where they keep leading themselves is like they get like, one or two games over 500. And it's like, all right, we'll try to get to that third game. Or, they win two in a row. It's like, try to get three. And then they just can't. And
Mm-hmm.
I think that's been
Yeah.
the biggest things from coming back from November where they had a really hot stretch is they can't get back to that play or at least go higher than what that play was. And I think that was the difference between this year's team and last year's team, if any of that makes sense.
Yeah, I mean, to gain traction, you've got to, figure out, you could use last night's game. You fight and you battle and get it to 4-4, and that's the one you got to figure out how to pull out. I mean, yeah,
Yeah.
an unbelievable goal scoring goal by Konechny early. The Tippett effort, phenomenal, like beautiful.
Great call.
Like where's that? I'd love to see that more
Right.
often. Like, boy, was that a power move? That was $10 million player move. That power move he made, and some moxie to come back and some stability and goal. And maybe it's for that team to give up four and think you're going to get 5 and 6 and try and win that way is really really difficult. And so. I know Torres has been on about better play in their own zone, and I mean you've gotten some nice individual efforts. Go back to the Lawton four-goal game. The Kate's line they've been good too.
They've been
Fourth
very
line they're
good.
chipping it.
Yeah.
And they're not defensive liability too much. So it's like it's you see that with a lot of teams where it's just like you need somebody to do something to close it out. We have
Yeah.
to get that one stop. We got to get that timely goal. We got to get that shot blocked. Um, a puck's got to hit the post instead of posting in. It's got to hit the post and go out. Like you need that break, and sometimes that can be frustrating. Now on the positive side, you are 6-5, like you said. We talked in mid-December, and they've 6-5 since. It's not horrible. It's kind of
Mm-mm.
where they are. It's 550, 600 hockey. Like it's you're in the mix and you're in the games, and so some of the details will be in the smaller details of the analytics and are we getting chances? I know shots haven't been there as much as they liked, especially like last night, and that's probably a little bit of a trend. So if that's not going to be there, then you can't be giving up 3 and 4 and 5 a night. That's just facts. And
Right.
last night was a little more run and gun. Like say, did they deserve everyone against? Probably not.
Yeah.
You would like to think that some of those would um, every bad chance you give up or every great chance you give up doesn't end up in your net. And some nights it does. So I do think you're getting spotty. I think the good players have been good, and then you are getting some spotty help other places, and just unfortunately some nights it's just not enough, right?
Yeah. Yeah, and again, I think it all just kind of goes back to like the roster construction, and they have some guys that are like duplicates of others. They have some other ones that are, again, they don't have a number one center. That's been the one of the biggest things. Um, Mike, I think for December, I'm curious kind of what you think about this because um, I feel like December is always weird with the NHL. Like there's so many things that go on. The schedules are different. You have the Christmas break in there, the roster freeze, you have World Juniors, all that stuff. Like as a player, what's the goal for December? Is it just like continue kind of what November was, or is it more of just trying to just kind of just go out there and play? Like don't focus on the other things. Obviously, I know that there's like a lot of buzz around teams because it's like you can make a couple trades. We saw three of them yesterday. Um, and things like that. Like, is that harder as a player? Like knowing that like maybe you could be in rumors and things like that. Like all that stuff. And obviously it's the holidays, so it's a frantic time for everybody. But is December like more of just like a crazier month? And is that something that can kind of mess with your head a little bit? You think?
I do think it's a crazy month, but it's kind of a fun one too. You
Yeah.
do have, like of the Four Nations. Um, some teams are starting to get into like, I wouldn't say panic mode, but they're really getting like, man, we're gonna have to make a deal here. Um, you have the holidays coming up. Your life away from the rink's a little frantic. You're trying to do some Christmas shopping. You got
Right.
extra parties to go to. The teams are doing parties. You kind of have some other distractions, and for the kids, for the players that have young children, it's the build up to that. So I think it is kind of, family might be popping in. So I think it's kind of a fun time of the year, actually, and your schedule gets a little unorthodox, right? You're kind of looking forward to you play maybe on the 23rd and then the 26th. You're looking forward to having the 24th and 25th off and just a day or two to relax and
Right.
then get back at it. I think, you know, again, like people, a lot of family come out, people are off work, whatever, and a lot of family want to try and come out and see a game. So sometimes your house fills up, and it's a little more relief to go to the rink just to kind of get out of the house and, your cousin, your uncle and your dad, they all want to come to they all, let's go to practice, take them to the rink and you're trying to juggle all that stuff. So I felt a lot of that stuff gets a little easier as you get older, but, then you have New Year's Eve creeping in there. And then, I think it's kind of a little bit of enjoyment here in December. And then like January, February start to be the dog days a little bit. Right. And that's so, I mean, I think, yeah, enjoying the holidays and all that. And, the guys get fired up about World Junior, he bets, guys, having fun with that and watching their countries play. And it's a little something to help them get through the holidays a little bit. Another thing to watch, come to the rink and, those
Right.
games are running and they're fun to watch. And so there's some other distraction. I find it a fun month,
Hmm.
because, just because I think January, February get to be the dog days. Whoever you get that Four Nations, you get your break. So it's not that bad. So you got about a 6 week grind after the first of January till that Four Nations Cup where, you're really going to have to either get in the playoff race or you're going to fall out
Yeah.
or it gets too late.
Right. Yeah. And as for the Flyers, it's been tough. It's I feel like, again, it's one of them things where last year, like you fought so hard to get close and to have a push, and like last probably 11 games they were in a spot, and they had I think it was like a 5, 6 point lead, and I think they had two games in hand on some teams, and then they just ended up I mean, obviously everybody knows how last year went, but I think when you look at this year, it's pretty similar. I mean, they're 500 as of right now, 14, 14 and 4. Um, they're 2 points out of the second wild card spot. They're 4 points out of the first. But from that first team, Tampa down to Detroit, there's only a 6 point difference. So it's not like they could put themselves in any different of a spot. Like every night it's gonna be like, oh, the Flyers are in a playoff spot, and then 20 minutes later they're out because another team's playing and all that too. So like, it's just one of them things where like, there's a couple of these losses in here, a couple of overtime losses, and then some regulation games like last night where it's like, these are points at the end of the end of the day where you're kind of kicking yourself in the ass because you lost them earlier in the season. But yeah, I mean, just going off that too, I wanted to talk about Emil Andrae because he's played well. He was sat. He's been sat a little bit the past couple of games. They put Zamula back in. It was the Columbus game. He got hit and it was up high, and I'm thinking that he
Watching his
gets
pass.
sat.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, and he got hit like up high. It looked like it was an elbow. I think off the top of my head, they checked it for a major. They called it a minor. I think it was a minor for boarding or elbowing. I think it was one of the two. And I think he's looked good, Andre. I mean, I think he's come in. I think this is one of the years where like he's had a legit chance to play, and I think he's played like an NHL defenseman. I think people are getting a little high on it. There's been comparisons to like Chemo Timonen and all this stuff. Obviously, you played with Chemo. Um, I don't want to go there because I feel like every time I go there, my hopes kind of get really let down. First of all, number one, and number two, I just don't think that that's fair to the player. Because I think he's played well, but at the same time, it's like I don't want to put too many expectations and things like that on him. Um, I didn't necessarily agree with Torres when he said that Andre was fighting it, Mike. I thought there was more of a I didn't know if there was something that was more to that, or if it was just the hit and they weren't saying that he was hurt or something like that. I don't know, but I feel like with Andre, he's definitely played good enough hockey to stay in the lineup. I think really every defenseman outside of Sanheim has kind of fought it. Really, Sanheim and Ristolainen. Um, you know what I mean? And if that was like the thing for Andre, then like I get it, but at the same time, like a guy that we mentioned earlier, York, who's had two pretty rough turnovers on that led the goals in the past two games. Like that's been kind of rough to watch too. So like I don't know, it's interesting, but just like any thoughts overall on Andre and just kind of how he's played?
Yeah, I mean, I think, we really gained a little bit of traction there, right? And then, you know, feeling more and more comfortable with the puck. And then, I think as a young D man, you got to realize the more you have the puck, you know, you tend to get targeted, and then you have to know who's on the ice with you. And Matthew Olivier, who hit him, is,
Hmm.
it's what he does. He's an up and down guy, and he's physical, and he's made no bones about that. And that's the way he's going to be successful. So, again, if you're going to hang on to these pucks, then you've got to be kind of slippery too. And he may learn, hey, I don't have to take, I still have to find a way to hang on to my pucks and make my plays. But at the same time, I don't need to be getting run over and hanging in there too long. I got to be able to slip some hits. So I do think that's part of the learning process. I do think he was really nicely gaining some traction and gaining confidence. You could see it gaining every day, and even amongst the staff. But again, young players, you might be developing, climbing, and then you're going to have a step or two back. And again, it's not much like the team. Like you don't keep improving like on a upward trajectory all the time. You might take a step back and step down, and then start moving forward again. Same things happen to young players, and off to a good start, you can have your confidence rise, get a little bit more longer leash, a little more thrown at you as a player, running this PP, and playing in these situations, these key moments, and then they might pull you back a little bit again, because you're faltering, and then somebody else is coming on, So I think he showed a ton of progress. I think he'd be very happy with it, and it's still like still got over half the season left. He's going to be back in there, and he'll
Yeah.
rebound and he'll get his chance again. And that's as a young player, you have to believe that. Be like, I'm not on the shelf forever. This is my little cycle of coming in and out. And I think it's been you know pretty consistent, pretty fair by Torts there, where he seems to run that kind of mo with a lot of young players. And I'll give
Hmm.
you some, and then I'm going to pull you back. I'll give you some more, and you can learn why I pulled you back, and then let's eliminate that and move on and become a better player. So in the long run, again, coaches, yeah, I mean, I don't know. Coaches want these guys or help train them so that it's not just about this year. He wants Andre to be a 12 or 15-year player. So I'm going to
Right.
try and install some foundation into you guys and Mishkov, and it's not always about this year and how good you can be this year. It's what you're going to be doing. Are you still going to be here in 12, 13 years, still playing, doing your thing because of what you learned when you're a young guy? And that's
Hmm.
really hard for young guys to understand.
Yeah. No, you're right. And I think that concept is harder for some, Flyers fans to understand too. And I think myself included sometimes because it's been 6 years since they've had a home playoff game, and you know what I mean? It's like it's hard to kind of judge that when like you've been rebuilding and you're still trying to kind of get back into what you are, but you need patience, and unfortunately, like no one in Philadelphia can be patient, and B, it's like it's incredibly hard for to keep calling for that when again you've struggled for so long. So like I think that's kind of like that's the hard part of them rebuilding is like trying to find the balance in between that.
It is, and it's the NHL is not a glorified American league, right? We're not,
Right.
you're not developing players in the NHL. You're playing for one reason, to win games, right?
Mhm.
And that's Major League Sports. There is some player development that goes on, obviously, with the guys that who are good enough to play in the league right now, but just have to learn some ins and outs. That's where there's some player development, but
Mhm.
and you get that where fans, across the league, get impatient, man. You're like, I don't need to watch people train to become NHL players. I want a good NHL team in my city, and I understand that, and yeah, it's always a hard line, and how the patience of a rebuild, and it's just like I probably imagine there's not a word in the English dictionary that gets a season ticket holder or a passionate true fan than hearing the word rebuild coming out of somebody's mouth, and you're just
Yeah.
like, oh, it probably makes them want to throw up in their mouth a little bit,
Hmm.
because that's you want your team good, and you want them now, and you want them good every year.
Right.
Like
Yeah.
so it's yeah. I don't blame people for that. It's hard when you know to swallow that pill all the time. This
Yeah.
rebuild pill for sure. You see it all over
Right.
the league too.
Yeah. I mean, it's everywhere. It's everywhere in sports. I mean, it's a lot of difference in kind of building teams now and things like that, and people that like wanted to just like tank for the draft and all those different things. First of all, like I think for me, like no one really wants to do that. I don't think anyone wants to watch that. And I think when you look at it, the players obviously the like players want to win. They don't want to. I don't know.
Mm-hmm.
It's hard for me to think that a player has any understanding or really even cares about where the draft, or about the draft A, or B, like where their team could fall in the draft or anything like that. Like I don't know. I just never understood the whole like tanking for picks and all that stuff. It's a hard concept for me to really understand.
Yeah, it's really irrelevant to current players because you talk about trying to get this draft capital, get all these picks, and realistically, they're 3, 4, 5 years away. How many guys are on the roster in 3, 4, 5 years? So you know that
Exactly.
most of these guys that come in, most of the guys that are drafted, unless it's well, your team's drafting in the top five, have zero chance to be there in 2 or 3 years, and more times than not, unless you're part of some nucleus
Right.
uh, of you can tell a franchise is committing to, that you're not going to be there either. So it really is really pretty irrelevant. And like you said, guys want to win. Guys, the Hathaways and Sean Couturier and the guys who are in their early to mid 30s, they're like, I mean, I'm not, they want to win. They've been in the league long enough, and they understand there's a rite of passage, and there's some being good to young guys and helping them grow, and they get that part. But it's not. We're not in. They're not in the player development business yet. They're trying to be in the winning business, and you know, whether I remember being scratched a little bit at one point and getting the idea pretty much from the coach is like, well, we're trying to develop young players and get them playing, and I was like, and I remember, I don't know if I said it or I was thinking, I'm like, well, this is not like a developmental league. Like if you want to win today, like you got to win today, right? We're not going to take our losses just to develop guys. And when you felt you had better players who weren't playing, so,
Hmm.
it's always, yeah, it's always a real fine line. So
Yeah. Right.
yeah, as fans, it's hard to swallow sometimes.
Yeah. No, 100%. For you, Mike, what is it easier for you to kind of go back and look at like other years too? Like when you think like, in hindsight now, was there more of an understanding, I guess, of like kind of knowing when a team was trying to kind of
Mhm.
trying to figure out how I want to ask this. When I guess when they move on or when they're trying to I guess trying to figure out like we probably could, at least maybe win a couple more games if somebody else is in the lineup versus like if they're or like just like straight just want to win all the time. Like, is it pretty obvious like from camp like they gotta figure that out, and is it one of them things where it's like you just have to kind of understand like who you're talking to and things like that?
Yeah, there's certain, I mean, certain years when a team's going for it a little bit more. I can think of my time in Boston where we really went for it. I think when I left the Flyers and I went to Washington and we won the President's Trophy, and they still added people, you
Yeah.
know. And then at the same time, you can tell sometimes when not that they're packing it in, and a lot of times when you're having a tough year, there's key injuries, right? You're kind of not healthy. You don't have your core. If so and so's down for the year, he's got a bad knee or something, and so has got a broken wrist, and they're just like, this guy needs shoulder surgery. Let's just shut him down and get it done, which creates room for young players to come in. Um, and I can think of right when I went to Boston, it was the same type of thing. I was like, oh my God, these guys are all NHL players. Like I didn't really know who half they were. And, and they were just filling spots, fill spots, right, and get through the season, and then try and regroup in the summer. So a lot of time, and I remember just a lot of guys on the shelf, so a lot of times the situations during the year, not necessarily bad play, but it's like injuries and, you know, guys getting shut down and kind of open up room for younger guys to play, but doesn't mean you're packing it in. If you're a veteran player, you're still playing. Guys are playing for contracts. Guys who have contracts up. You're playing for your spot next year. You're playing. I think as a young player, you got to be naive. You don't be naive enough to think that hey, like stuff's going to go down in the summer around here. And I think that was some of these years when you're bad. You're like stuff will happen this summer. They're not going to sit pat.
Right.
Nobody's happy about this. Like they're. So if you're like playing in a town, you better play your rear end off the last little bit because you don't want to leave and go in the summer with them, shifting your name over the list of expendables and, or you may want to be on that list. I don't know, but, there's better ways to do it. You have an agent tell them or whatever, but as a player, you're always trying to play and you never know who's watching and whatever team, especially if your contract is up, you're just going to keep playing as much as you could,
Right.
and then when guys go down, it's opportunity for other guys to play. So,
Right.
I know I'm rambling a little bit, but yeah.
No, no, no. No, I think it's a lot better when you ramble. Um,
Yeah. Yeah.
you know, I honestly I agree, Mike. I feel like one of the things with me is like I've always kind of looked at this as like I don't think the Flyers are doing this the traditional way. Like I've always kind of looked at the rebuild as like they're gonna have their years where they're gonna kind of be like this year, where they're gonna be quiet and they don't do a ton, and then fans are gonna get pissed off because they're not doing anything, and then there are gonna be summers like probably like this summer, which is what I'm expecting, is that they're gonna have like I just feel like that they're gonna have a summer, like they're just gonna go out and they're gonna get talent. They're gonna try and just kind of add in every way that they can. Um, I mean, I could be wrong. That's just kind of how I see it. I don't think that they have to be doing this. Like I never understood the whole thing. That's like you know you have to do stuff now, but also at the same time you have to uh kind of like essentially like kind of wait for your chance. But I feel like at the same time like we've never really had a really a GM and since Homer. Funny enough, that's the guy who, obviously that's the last conversation we had on this, but um, really, like, I honestly, I think since Paul Holmgren, we haven't had necessarily a run where they've kind of stayed pat with like the same kind of guys and they've been a little patient and like, I mean, Homer was patient, but he wasn't at the same time. Like, I mean, obviously he had that, the big year in '08. But then, I mean, he kept it together until 11. I mean, that's 3 years there. And then obviously fired from the cup final right after you left. But like, I think there's a difference. It's like knowing when to pounce, but also like being patient. And like I think the Flyers, they've already come out and said like be patient and things like that, and that they have a lot of dead money kind of tied up in things and things like that too. And I don't think it's one of them things because I think like there's the idea of kind of because obviously like fans are going to be upset about different things, and obviously they want moves and things like that. I know this is a really long-winded question, but I think like the idea of like looking at other trades and things that happen is like a missed opportunity, and like constantly looking at it like that, and like for me that's hard to grasp because I don't think we really know if they even checked in on it or talked about it or whatnot. B, it's another one of them things too where it's like I think it's harder to constantly look at everything. Well, it's like, oh, well, that's a missed opportunity. That's a missed opportunity. Where it's like, we don't even really know if they even checked in or really, in the other token of it, it's like, was that team, was he asking price for the Flyers higher? You know what I mean? Like, because I don't necessarily think that there's always needs to be moves like middle of the season, earlier in the season, things like that either. It's like, I think a lot of people right now are just kind of trying to figure out what the Flyers could be. And I think it kind of goes back to what I was saying earlier, where it's like you really just want to figure out what the team is because they have a lot of duplicates. They don't have a first line center, all those little things. And you're trying to still figure that out at the same time while rebuilding. And it's tough. So like I get people want to see moves, but it's hard for me to look at something as like everything's a missed opportunity when we don't really know like if the Flyers even like checked in or really anything like that.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of conversations had every day, right? And there's whether, at different levels, assistant GMs talk to each other, GMs talk to each other, you know, uh, there's different levels of conversations and where something gets some traction or uh, where somebody wants to take and like develop the trade a little bit further or something like that. But it's hard when everybody's kind of at that cap and, to find the money and to replace money. It's hard to find like an even up trade. It's, everybody's trying to get rid of something to make their team better, whether they're trying to get rid of money and accepting a little back. Nobody really likes to add money and give away a smaller salary and then take a big one back unless they feel like it's
Right.
a home run.
Yeah.
So, it gets really hard. And then the summertime making changes, it's depends where your cap money's, what you got going, who's expiring, what you feel like you've got to spend on certain guys to retain, core guys that are so valuable, those guys that are coming into their own and who's out there, what you owe, and any buyouts. And, it's tough, it's putting a sandcastle together, it's like keeping a sandcastle up. It's just all the time there's something ready to come out of the floor here. But I, I GMs are much busier than you think. I mean, it's the phone is attached to their ear, and there's always something. They're always kicking the tires on something and
Yeah.
trying to figure out how best they can do it. So, certainly doesn't do a lot for fans, but you know, every GM out there is working hard to figure out something to do all the time, every day to make their team better. So
All right. All right. I know we've been going for a bit. So yeah, I mean, I think that's it. Um, Anything else, Mike?
no, no,
No?
good.
Good. Yeah. No,
A lot today. Yeah,
again,
yeah,
yeah, no, it's been
rambling
a
today.
lot. Yeah. Yeah, no, and obviously I think it's good too, we haven't talked in a bit and all, and um, I feel like a lot of it is good talk for kind of where the team's going, and I think just kind of overall, just like the makeup of the team and things like that too. So yeah, I mean, again, we'll obviously thanks everybody again for all the support. Checking out Kicking It With Knuble. I got some stuff in the works for me and Mike to be doing. Some different things you might be seeing across the waves, so should be fun. And yeah, hope you guys all have a good holidays. And yeah, talk to you guys all again next time. See you guys.
Thank you. See ya.